And we're live, Your Worship.
Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. Good evening, everyone, ladies and gentlemen, staff and council. Call this meeting to order. I will turn it over to Councillor DeLeo for our land acknowledgement. Councillor DeLeo.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, everyone. We begin our meeting by recognizing the First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples of Canada as traditional stewards and caretakers of the land. We acknowledge that the town of Wasaga Beach is located within the boundaries of Treaty 18, the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, Tionantadi, Wendat, and is the home of many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples as part of an intricate nationhood that reaches across Turtle Island. At this time of truth and reconciliation, we welcome the opportunity to work together towards new understandings and new relationships and ask for guidance in all we do.
Thank you very much, Councillor DeLeo. And moving on to item number 2 on the agenda, disclosure of pecuniary interest. I have none before me at this time. If anyone should feel they have one throughout the meeting, please let us know at that time. Item number 3, approval of the agenda. We do have a motion resolved that the contents of the agenda for March 28th, 2023 be approved as circulated. May I have a mover and a second? A move by Councillor DeLeo, seconded by Deputy Mayor Snell. All in favor? That motion is carried. Moving on to item number 4, deputations, presentations, petitions, and public meetings. We do have one this evening. And that is, of course, our staff presenting our budget. So, Madam Treasurer, we'll turn the floor over to you.
Thank you, and good evening, Your Worship, members of Council, staff, and visitors. Tonight's presentation will cover the proposed 23 budget and provide the 4-year operating and capital forecast for information. We have a few presenters participating in this evening's summary, and I would like to begin by asking our CAO to provide some opening remarks.
Thank you, Jocelyn. Mr. Mayor, members of council, residents, and business owners in the audience and at home. We are pleased to present the budget at this evening's public meeting and look forward to receiving comment this evening. I wanted to provide some brief opening remarks before passing things along back to the Treasurer. Staff have worked extremely hard to bring forward a budget that is fiscally prudent and that keeps services affordable for our residents. In 2023, we faced some unprecedented challenges in the town of Wasaga Beach. Inflation is rising dramatically. Interest rates are increasing. Lagging COVID impacts that are causing supply chain issues and driving up costs across the board. Provincial downloading, provincial policies such as Bill 109 that is forcing municipalities to cut processing times in half on development applications or face financial penalties by having to refund application fees. Bill 23 that is downloading significant infrastructure costs on municipalities at an unprecedented level. In addition to things such as prior investment choices, Arena Library is one of the most significant, where the town chose to go it alone on a $60 million arena, and unfortunately the bill is now coming due. In addition to this, we have worked extremely hard over the past few months to try and stabilize the corporation that has been subjected to one of the largest mass exoduses in the town's history, where we lost approximately 61% of the workforce. There's multiple reasons for these departures, including inflexibility and operating too lean. Evidence of this, in 2022, the corporation paid over $1.2 million in overtime to staff. That's a key indicator that you're working your staff too hard. Combined with the fact that 61% of staff left, those are two indicators that tell us we need to step in and intervene, which is what we've done. We have added staff positions to this budget, and we believe that is fiscally responsible. We have to stabilize the corporation for the best interests of this community. In terms of prudent fiscal management, faced with all of the above challenges, staff have put forward a very responsible budget. And to be very clear, if we removed the impact of the Arena Library from this budget, we would be in line with all of our neighbors in terms of the tax increases that you are seeing, Springwater, Clearview, Collingwood, etc. No one else in our vicinity is going at it alone on a $60 million Arena Library. In fact, other communities that were contemplating such infrastructure investments put those projects on hold, including the city of North Bay, a community twice our size that ultimately received funding from other levels of government. That is what we were attempting to do in 2014 to 2018 when I previously worked for the town of Wasaga Beach. We were on the list at the provincial level to be considered for one-third partnerships with the province and federal government. Unfortunately, the town went forward, and again, we have to move forward. It's a piece of infrastructure that we need to bring to conclusion. As part of prudent fiscal management, the budget supports initiatives and preserves service levels for the community, positions us to receive growth, which we are required to do by the province, and meet legislative requirements. We're placing a priority on working and leveraging external partnerships, so when we are in the future faced with large infrastructure investments, we can bring the federal and provincial governments to the table to help offset the impact to our taxpayers. And there will be an incredible focus on growing the non-residential tax base to try and ease the residential tax burden, which is currently skewed far too much towards residential. Approximately 91% of our tax base is residential. That is, quite frankly, unsustainable in the long term for this community. This is a strategic budget where we have worked with council to identify your priorities that represent what you heard during the election. We have vetted this budget to ensure that we are putting money towards the things that you have told us you value and that the community has told us they value. And we are focusing on driving some key catalytic projects that will maximize return on investment moving forward. So those are some key opening remarks, and I'll turn it back over to our treasurer.
Thank you. So our agenda for tonight's presentations include the budget process, a high-level operating and capital budgets, highlights of the 23 changes, new staffing positions in 23, a review of details of how the 23 budget will impact taxes on the average household, reserve projections, and department presentations, and then at the end we will look at the 23 to 26 forecast period. So each year, the annual budget is prepared for the following year as per Section 291 of the Municipal Act. During an election year, the budget for the upcoming year cannot be approved until the calendar year for the budget. As a result, this changes the timeline for the budget process, and the schedule is stretched out throughout the first quarter as the new council gets established. Council will set their term of priorities for the council term. As an interim measure, staff begin the budget process of reviewing the previous budget and proposed upcoming budget. Staff look closely at all line items and adjust up or down as justified. New initiatives are discussed within the scope of what the town has already committed to and what reasonably can be afforded. Efficiency opportunities are highlighted, and justifications for some of the changes are related to the improved output, such as new software that offers improved performance for staff. For the 23 budget, staff prepared the Draft 1 document as an opening budget to allow council members to become familiar with the various department budgets. This first draft was presented December 15th, and discussion of the Draft 1 budget took place on January 19th, with further dialogue on February 9th. As we moved into the third draft on March 10th, the majority of the budget changes were established, and the budget process included council's approval to move to the public meeting where we are tonight. The opportunity for the public to engage in the discussion and offer their comments is an important part of the budget process. The last step in the process is the passing of the bylaw authorizing the budget for 23. In most years, the budget is passed in December at the last council meeting, usually within a week or 10 days after the public meeting. However, as 22 was an election year, the 23 budget will be presented to council for consideration of passing the budget on April the 13th. The total 23 budget is $111.6 million. The budget has two components: operating budget, which is $51.7 million and represents 46% of the total budget, and the capital budget of $59.9 million and is the remaining 54%. As a comparison, the total budget for '22 was at $102.3 million. Excuse me. The town has four major committees within their governance structure. The budget package is grouped by committees, which includes general government at $15.9 million, community services is $41.6, public works at $50 million, and planning and development of $4 million. And a review of the budget package that was distributed with this agenda includes the operating summary and the capital summary. These documents are grouped by these four committees, and you can see which departments and programs are included in each committee group. So we'll look now at the budget increases over the '22 budget. So it's increased by $9.3 million. The following items are the main changes of the increase. So in the first item, we have the payroll step, COLA, grid adjustments, and severances are included in the $1 million. These include both non-union and union staff. Next, we have new positions that are added in '23, which will increase the cost by $1.5 million. Debenture costs increased by $306,000 for the additional carrying cost related to the Arena Library facility. The total capital program increases by $2.6 million, and details of the changes will be covered in later department slides. The Ontario Municipal Partnership Fund is a grant program and is on schedule to reduce by 15% each year. The portion of the reduction impacting taxation is $49,000. This means each year the town must fund through taxation the decreased amount of grant funding. Insurance costs were a major cost driver this year at $312,000. The wastewater operating programs increased by $633,000, and police and fire program costs at another $525,000. And the final amount of general variances is $317,000. So those are the high-level changes in the budget that drove the increase from over the '22 budget level. So looking at the new staffing positions, you can see there are several changes that are added, and it's due to the increased demand on staff related to growth. Our overtime costs reflect some of the demand departments are experiencing, and the new positions are throughout almost all departments, as can be seen here in the list of department increases. And we have some more on the next page. The increases for '23 amount to $1.5 million, with many of the positions added at different periods throughout the year. In 2024, these positions will have full impact of 12 months, and the annualized cost will be closer to $3 million. As a result of the large cost and the high number of positions that the town is in need of, it will be necessary in the next couple of years to use some tax rate stabilization reserves to help smooth out the impact of these costs. The next few slides will look at the tax levy. The pie chart in this slide shows the taxes for a household with an assessment of $333,000, which is the average assessed value for the town of Wasaga Beach per MPAC. The taxes in total are $3,620 for the year, and the education portion represents 14% of the tax bill, and in this example, the taxes are $509 of the total $3,620. The county portion is $962 or 27%, and the municipal portion for local services is $2,148 or 59% of the total bill. The municipality collects the taxes for all three government services, and then the town remits the education and county portions quarterly. So for every dollar of taxes paid, the town keeps 59 cents, and 41 cents goes to other levels of government. This slide presents the change in the taxation levy from 22 to 23. The total taxation in 22 is 28 million, and adding growth from the assessment base, the town can afford to increase the levy by 868,000 without increasing the tax rate. In 23, the phase-in portion of the assessment increase that is usually available to the town is zero due to the provincial freezing of the phase-in because of COVID. Therefore, the balance of the levy, $2.5 million, must be covered through a tax rate increase of 8.6%. The final 23 levy is $31 million. As new homes and new businesses are built, the assessed value for the town goes up. This increase in the assessment base helps to cover increased taxation, lessening the tax rate percentage increase necessary to pay for the total levy, but it does not cover it all. For this slide, MPAC's average household assessment is $333,000, and the first table shows the municipal tax dollar change, which is $170.50. Note that the columns to the right, the dollar change in the taxes for assessment is zero. Therefore, the only change in the municipal tax rate is due to the tax rate increase, as we have no offsetting benefit from the assessment phase-in, which normally would be part of this analysis. Looking now at the smaller table, the three tax rates are shown: municipal, education, and county, and the percentage change is given for each. In 23, the education tax rate has been frozen for a few years, so there is no increase in that portion of the tax bill. The county rate is 3.5%, and the rate that taxpayers would use to understand how much their taxes would go up is the blended tax rate, which is 5.9%. This is the rate of change between total taxes paid in 22 versus the total taxes paid in 23. So looking how your tax dollars are working for you, this slide provides a simple summary of how the dollars are spent per $100. So looking at the top three, we have Public Works at $16.93, or 16%, 16.9%, and policing is at 16% as well. And then we have fire, health, and safety costs at 14.7%. So the remaining groups and services are at a cost per $100 that is below 10%. These percentages of programs and services help identify the higher service cost delivery areas and a general perspective of the cost of the programs and services relative to the total budget. So we'll now look at the reserves, and the total for all reserves, deferred revenues, and reserve funds is estimated to be $80.5 million at the end of 22. Year-end surpluses are the most common way of building the reserves. As well, some reserves are replenished through a contribution to the reserve built into the budget. The purpose of these reserves is to help pay for future items that will require some additional funding. Capital asset replacement is one of the largest reserves that we use frequently for fleet vehicles and other infrastructure replacements, such as the new arena and library. These funds are drawn from the reserves through the budget process or through a specific in-year council decision. Reserves help to ensure that there are funds for unexpected large expenditures, such as maintenance or repair, smoothing the tax rate over multiple years, asset replacements, and to help fund one-time opportunities. It is also important to note that carryover amounts for a project from one year to the next will flow through the reserves in 1 year and out the next year. So that concludes the overview of the budget, and we're now ready to begin the departmental budgets. So at this time, I would like to ask our CAO to present the next few slides.
Thank you, Jocelyn. So to highlight some of the key things we were looking at as part of the administration budget, first of all, it's advancing council's priorities as part of the term of council priority document that was recently approved by council. Mentioned earlier, building a culture of excellence through stabilizing the culture, investing in our staff, building a positive work environment, and then advancing some key strategic priorities. These would include things such as beachfront redevelopment, development on Main Street, pursuing a high school for this community, focusing on economic development initiatives to attract investment to the community and help broadening our tax base to reduce reliance on residential, and pursuing intergovernmental partnerships. Within the Office of the CAO, we have a few new positions. The first is Deputy CAO, Special Projects, Mr. Jerry Marshall. We're also looking at bringing a legal general practitioner on board. The reason for this is the town is spending a tremendous amount of time and dollars outsourcing legal advice. Bringing legal counsel in-house, a general practitioner, will help offset costs that we are currently paying for external legal counsel. So there is cost recovery involved in that. It will also improve the efficiency of the organization. Things that oftentimes can take 3, 4, 5 days to get an answer on, you can get them within a matter of minutes when you can walk down the hall. Strategic project leader, we are looking at career development opportunity and bringing some project management within the office of the CAO so that they can help us drive the key strategic priorities for the corporation. And we have enhanced the role of communications officer to that of strategic communications and intergovernmental relations to help the municipality really leverage and pursue external funding, both at the county, province, and the federal level. In terms of some of the numbers, the operations budget is $5.3 million. The tax-supported portion of operations is $2.2 million. The department budget contains several corporate items aside from the office of the CAO. In particular, of the $5.3 million budget, the Ontario Municipal Partnership Fund grant and casino revenues are transferred to reserved and represent approximately $2.2 million. The budget includes the staffing for the Office of the CAO, Communications and Human Resources. And other programs included in the budget are an after-hours medical clinic, doctor recruitment, Conservation Authority, and grants to organizations including the local food bank. The blue bar on the chart illustrates the total cost, with the orange bar representing the amount of the expenses supported by taxation. In terms of some of the capital items, we have elevator replacement. This is a requirement to make the town hall AODA compliant, transferring to reserves, building maintenance, and upgrades. In terms of council's operating budget, the operating budget is just shy of $450,000 and is funded through taxation. The main cost for this budget is council remuneration and a portion of the staffing cost for the executive assistant to the mayor and CAO. The blue bar on this chart represents the total cost, with the orange bar representing the amount of the expenses supported by taxation. And then finally, for the beachfront, the operations budget is $774,000, and the tax-supported portion of operations is $46,000. The main costs for this budget are janitorial services for the washroom facilities down at the beachfront, property taxes, insurance, and building maintenance and staffing. The beachfront development cost included in this budget is $130,000 to continue moving forward with redevelopment, and the capital budget includes $200,000 for design work for Festival Square. Those two items will be advanced following receipt of submissions to the RFP that has gone out to the public. The blue bar on this chart illustrates the total cost, with the orange bar representing the amount of expenses supported by taxation. And finally, the policing budget, which I should note is beyond the control of the municipality. We are required to pay this and are simply given a bill and said, that's what you owe. It's about $5 million, represents a 4.3% increase over 2022, and represents 16% of the total taxation required. So this is a significant amount that is within the budget. And I will now turn it over to Legislative Services, and Nicole, I'll pass you.
Thank you, Andrew. The Clerk's Division administers licensing, records management, freedom of information, the council reports, agendas, and minutes, vital statistics, and of course, the municipal election. This division also provides policy advice throughout the corporation and provides committee oversight. The Clerk's Division is staff liaison to the town's Accessibility Advisory Committee, who is committed to improving opportunities for people with disabilities and to provide for their involvement in the identification, removal, and prevention of barriers to full participation within the community. These responsibilities are heavily regulated by provincial legislation, municipal policy, and bylaws. Operational costs of this division include administrative costs, costs to support council, records management, staffing, and of course, committee initiatives. The capital costs indicated on the slide include costs for mobility mats and playground accessible signage. A records retention and electronic software project will be initiated with a phased approach. Maintaining proper records is a legislative requirement under the Municipal Act. The budget includes funds for a phased-in approach. However, more funding and staffing will be required in future budgets for proper record management. Efforts will continue in modernizing efficiencies and creating policies and processes. The Clerk's Division is also committed to monitoring any legislative changes and implementing new policies and bylaws where required. The operations budget is approximately $603,000. The tax-supported portion of this operation cost is $502,000. The department is a supporting service center with the services delivered through staff, hence the main cost driver is staffing. A new staffing position in the amount of $15,000 is included in the 2023 budget for records management. And as mentioned, the blue bar on the chart illustrates the total cost, with the orange bar representing the amount of the expenses supported through taxation. I'll now pass the presentation to the Deputy Clerk.
Thank you, Madam Clerk, Your Worship, members of council, and members of the public. The Wasaga Beach Cemetery is municipally run, provides maintenance and care, and offers both lot and niche sales. Looking at our capital projects, we have dedicated funds for the purchase of a new columbarium unit to arrive in May. This is a 48-unit granite structure to allow for the interment of cremations, into niches. There is a program service cost of approximately $82,000, a tax support base of $13,000, and it is fee supported with in the amount of $69,000. There will be an update coming on the March 30th Joint Committee of the Whole and Council to review and implement new user fees for the cemetery.
Good evening, Mayor Smith, members of council, and members of the public. Just going over the municipal law enforcement section, the budget includes both parking and the bylaw division for operating and capital budgets. As you can see on the screen here, we have administration, business licensing, property standards, and bylaw services, as well as within the capital budget equipment. The highlights of the parking division include substantial increases to the parking lot revenues, adding $287,000 to this year's budget. The three main parking lots in particular that have generated higher revenues include Playland parking lot, MPA lot, and 3rd Street lot. The total operating budget for the parking is $492,000. Included for 2023 are 2 additional summer officers at a cost of $33,000 to address the increased activity for a level of service. The department's activities over the last 4 years have gone up significantly since 2018, and they continue to rise. From 2018 to 2022, calls for service have increased by 82%, and we have seen a rising trend with a variety of complaints coming in. With this expansion, we will be able to address more proactive and reactive community involvement throughout the town. The parking budget results in a surplus of $401,000, which is transferred to the bylaw budget. Under the capital part of the budget, there is a small amount of $58,000 spent on equipment, which includes signage updates, computer upgrades, and parking meter replacements for 2023. Highlights for the bylaw program include additional revenue for the parking budget that have been transferred into the bylaw budget to help reduce the level of taxation required. Business licensing is another notable highlight as it has provided $80,000 in revenue for the year. The total program cost is $673,000, with $561,000 going towards staffing. The total taxation support required for bylaw department is $150,000. This year, there is one new position being added, which is for a property standards enforcement and parking officer at a cost of $77,000. As stated above, the department's activities over the last 4 years have increased significantly. So with the rising trend of both proactive and reactive occurrences, we want to ensure that the department's priorities are to address more property standards violations on a proactive basis. With additional officer, we can ensure staff are maintaining a reasonable workload while also being able to expand our proactive enforcement. Lastly, under the capital part of the budget, there is a new light-duty vehicle from an additional vehicle that was planned in 2021, but then deferred to 2023. This is a requirement due to the increased activity in our level of service and to ensure officers have vehicles available to use for inspection purposes. That includes my presentation, and I will turn it over to Jocelyn.
Thank you. For the next two presentations, I will speak to Treasury and Information Technology. The major goals for 23 continue with the e-commerce rollout with more payment availability on the website. We have a team approach to providing customer service excellence, and we are investing funds to earn interest revenues that will help to offset other financing costs. We are also taking a look at digital processing of accounts payable to provide efficiency gains in the accounts payable process. The revenues included in the Treasury budget provide interest-earning investments of $1.6 million. There are other revenues from interest and penalties, fees for services, and internal support revenue from other departments receiving support from the Treasury function. Treasury has a small capital program of $13,000, which is used for furniture and equipment purchases. Looking at the operating budget for Treasury, which is $1.6 million, there is a surplus generated of $886,000 that contributes to the reduction of taxation required in the $2.2 million debenture budget. As the graph shows, the staffing costs are the main expense for the support department. The remainder of the Treasury budget is status quo with annual inflationary increases and step and COLA adjustments. The net Treasury and financing budgets have a taxation impact of $1.3 million, and that's the Treasury and the debenture budgets netted. This slide speaks to some of the highlights for information technology services. Customer service for both internal and external customers is a major focus for the department in 23. There are several software projects being rolled out, and supporting the staff using these new softwares is a major part of the IT department's role. The focus for the corporation is digitization, and the IT team will assist with moving this requirement forward. CityView is an application that was rolled out last year, but still has work to be done to finalize the rollout this year. As well, we have a new software for asset management that is being implemented in '23 and is another major application for the IT project team. The IT budget includes capital equipment of routine life cycle nature, and annually a contribution to the IT reserve is maintained. The graph on the screen shows the total IT operations budget of $846,000, which is tax supported by $627,000. As with most of the other support departments, staffing is a major cost in the budget. The IT department maintains a managed computer services contract with a provider that specializes in the security and networking efficiencies, auditing and monitoring of our systems to ensure the town's electronic processes and information is well protected. This concludes the Treasury and IT budgets, and we will now move into the Community Services section of the budget. So I will pass this over to, thank you, our Fire Chief, Craig Williams.
Thank you, and good evening, Your Worship, members of Council. Thank you for the opportunity to present the 2023 Fire Department Emergency Management and Health and Safety Budget. The budget includes all costs associated with delivering fire protection services to the residents and the visitors of Wasaga Beach. Our departmental responsibilities include administrative oversight, legislative reporting, public education, fire code enforcement, dispatching, emergency response, and maintenance of our fire stations, vehicles, and equipment. Each year, we complete approximately 100 hours of community program, which often includes attendance at public events, fire safety talks for children and seniors, emergency management presentations, fire station tours, fire extinguisher training, and we support many local organizations, including during our food and toy drives. During 2022, we conducted approximately 350 fire and life safety inspections, and we responded to 2,045 emergency calls. The 2023 budget includes the town's first dedicated fire prevention inspector position, who will be responsible for the oversight of our inspection program, as well as fire code enforcement in our municipality. The department provides firefighter training on a weekly basis to our staff, and some of the examples include basic firefighter skills, water rescue, vehicle extrication, hazardous material response, technical rescue, and company officer development. During 2023, we will be marking our 75th anniversary as a fire department, and we are planning several activities throughout the year to engage our community and celebrate our rich history. The total operating budget for the fire department in 2023 is $4.2 million. Emergency management is another legislative responsibility that involves creating plans and training municipal staff members to respond to large community emergencies. This year's budget includes basic emergency equipment maintenance needs. Our health and safety budget also includes the addition of a shared staff resource who will focus their time on the legislative requirements of our municipal health and safety program, and will also support the Human Resource Department with a number of services and programs. The graph in front of you now intends to illustrate the distribution of the fire department budget. Of the $4.2 million allocation, $4 million is supported by the tax base. As you will see, the vast majority of our budget is dedicated to staffing-related costs. And finally, the 2023 budget includes a number of capital investments. The balance of the budget from the renovation of Fire Station 2 will be remitted. The renovation was made possible due to the federal Investing in Canada infrastructure grant that was valued at $361,000. We also have additional capital investments, which include the refurbishment of pumper number 2, the replacement of expired bunker gear and self-contained breathing apparatus bottles, and also updating a number of radio equipment pieces at fire station number 2. I will now pass the presentation over to Recreation.
Good evening, Your Worship, Deputy Mayor Snell, and members of council. Thank you for your time this evening. To begin, I'd like to refer you all to page 63 if you're interested to follow along in the different budget numbers. The 10 or 11 interesting pages are related, therefore, to the Recreation Events and Facilities budget. So the Recreation Events and Facilities Department oversees the provision of various services operated through the following 4 divisions: customer service, facilities, special events, and recreation, which includes a variety of operational programs, as well as the youth center, the seniors active living center, both arenas, and the Recplex. Overall department operations in 2023 do require tax support totaling $2.4 million, although the department revenues add almost $1 million to offset their total expenditures. So some highlights of the department's 2023 budget are illustrated in the following 9 slides. Typical recreation highlights include ongoing improvements in theater programs, community art, pickleball, summer day camp, and school swim programs. And then an important addition to the Recreation Events and Facilities budget for 2023, changes to staffing, primarily related to the expanded Twin Pad facility and customer service requirements at the new Twin Pad Arena and Library. There are also ongoing facility project management requirements built into the 2023 plan. Lastly, minor position changes are also planned in special events and the youth center staffing structures. Arena operations, the arenas have been projected to straddle, or the budget has been projected to straddle 2 facilities in 2023. Staff onboarding and utility cost estimates make up the 2 most significant cost increases, and council should understand that revenues related to ice rentals won't truly be realized to offset costs until 2024. Some key program additions for our staff group include building commissioning, staff training. The late fall opening will bring public into the facility, walking track, concession and pro shop management, and along with ice expected maybe for a couple months on both pads. We are projecting $442,000 in ice revenues between the 2 buildings in 2023. So Seniors Active Living Center, certainly the budget reflects further expansion into the East End. We have registered program revenues increasing $7,000. There is certain uptake in the registered programs, and although the costs aren't dramatic, I think the revenue speaks to the quality and the interest from our community. And last but not least, the Community Super. This has been a very popular event in the past, and it fizzled a little bit, but council should be pleased to know that we now operate out of the Recplex, and the numbers are far higher than we ever had at the former youth center / Salk building, and we expect big things as the program develops with more volunteers and more interest from the community. Youth center programs, a significant budget number that was shown, but also reported positive revenues through community support. We've already had our anti-bullying event, which was the first of a speaker series built into the youth center programs. Very well attended. Just over the past week, close to 2,000 people were involved in this important event that will be structured into the youth center budget and obviously shows changes from 2022. There are also expanded marketing assistant duties, utilizing part-time staff in the department to pick up additional costs that were often outsourced from our department. And last but not least, it doesn't get much mention in the capital section of my presentation, but there are ongoing capital improvements related to landscaping as well as HVAC improvements, which are important to that building on Mosley Street. Lastly, operational program division, the special events division. We certainly have some anticipated changes in that group, but the structure is still built into the Recreation Events and Facilities Department budget section. There are external event sponsorships, $57,000 there to support outside providers. Certainly, special events opportunities are growing as the outside is finding their way back to Wasaga Beach. A significant number. Our sponsorship level of 35,000, only 12,000 was used in 2022, but that number remains and is there for expanded ideas. We know that there is a ongoing interest for tourism type activations, which will be coming out of the external event sponsorship number. Corporate events and initiatives, this certainly is a big section of the specific work that's accomplished by the division. And beyond that, 15 specific community events totaling a big chunk, $323,000, but obviously well-attended events that have become great traditions in Wasaga Beach and ongoing work by the small events division to bring these ideas to our community. And then last but not least, there are a number of capital programs. It goes without saying that there are significant dollars in the 2023 budget built into completing the Twin Pad Arena facility. Specifically, $18 million is the arena portion of the building as we work out towards public accessing the facility at the end of 2023. There's also capital dollars committed to furniture, fixtures, and equipment, $997,000 listed in the budget. And last but not least, a second ice resurfacer. This is an electric ice resurfacer. It was purchased in 2022. We expect delivery in the summer of 2023 in time for the opening. And one additional light-duty vehicle to be used by the facility staff working out of the East End. And last but not least, a few more capital projects that are notable in the budget. The Recplex, an important building that has obviously been well used, coming on 2 decades. And with that, there is ongoing facility improvements that will be required. We're looking at the 2 largest air handling units that take care of the gymnasium, estimated cost of $180,000. Also the sound system in the gymnasium, an upgrade that's required after 20 years. There's $31,000 for signage, both on the building and the pylon sign, and an exercise that could complement other buildings in town with the recreation events and facilities. And last but not least, kitchen appliance improvements for $12,000. And that concludes my presentation, and with that, I'll pass on to my colleague Pam for the library presentation.
Good evening, Your Worship, Deputy Mayor Snell, members of council, and Wasaga Beach residents. The Wasaga Beach Public Library Board and staff welcome this opportunity to explain the many ways that the library responsibly utilizes taxpayers' dollars for the betterment of the community. With a wonderful new library scheduled to open in November of this year, it is especially important for residents to understand how additional funds will be utilized to help solidify Wasaga Beach Public Library's position as a key community resource and social hub. During this presentation, I will touch on both the current and new library's operating expenses, as well as how capital funds will be attributed in 2023. Wasaga Beach residents and visitors utilize the library in many ways. In 2022, the library had more than 42,000 visitors, lent out almost 88,000 items, and offered more than 500 programs attended by approximately 7,000 people. This year, the library intends to add to its roster of lifelong learning programs. To encourage people's interest in arts and culture, staff are organizing a special Wonders of Wasaga Beach photo contest with free photography instruction for children and adults. Winning photos will be showcased in the new library. As well, in 2023, The library will be offering new digitization equipment for people to convert slides, negatives, and photos to digital formats that can be shared with family and friends. Literacy programming will be given a special focus this year with a new and improved 1,000 Books Before Kindergarten program, complete with special incentives and tracking materials. As well, with funding support from the Friends of Wasaga Beach Public Library, the library will be staging a summer reading club school challenge that pits students from the 3 elementary schools against each other for grand prizes. Offering access to information and resources is another way that Wasaga Beach Public Library serves the community. In 2023, the library aims to increase access to the e-books and audiobooks by switching to a new platform that will triple the current digital collection. Watch for this move to Cloud Library in April. This year, the library is also offering a selection of new online resources like Transparent Languages for developing language skills, as well as teen health and wellness to help young people better understand everything from eating disorders to drug use. The library is committed to finding additional ways to serve the community. In 2023, the Wasaga Beach Public Library Bookmobile will be going to local food banks and community housing developments to offer free internet access, collection materials, and programming. As well, the Bookmobile will have a new route along the perimeter of the town to reach residents who are unable to access the library building. Also, the library will continue to partner with local service providers to ensure that residents have the supports they need to cope with diabetes, grief, Alzheimer's, food insecurity, and more. All of these programs and services are organized and provided by library staff, and that is why the majority of the library's budget for operating, approximately $1 million, is designated for staffing. In 2023, in preparation for the larger building's needs, Wasaga Beach Public Library will be ramping up its staffing with approximately 1,600 hours, or the equivalent of 0.88 full-time. The library plans to hire 7 additional part-time staff, including 2 new junior library aide positions that will be available for students who will assist the library with collection maintenance after school, 4 new library assistants to help ensure library users have the help they need with computers, self-checkout stations, and finding materials in this new space, and a new makerspace facilitator who will develop unique learning opportunities using a 3D printer, photography and videography equipment, and other new tools. The new staff will cost just over $69,000 in 2023, with an annualized cost of $201,000. Wasaga Beach Public Library is a registered nonprofit corporation. Its mandate is to provide equitable access to all services, programs, and materials. For that reason, revenue generation is not a primary goal. The result is that, with the exception of provincial grant funding, the majority of the library's operational funding is through tax support. The library's total operations budget for 2023 is $1.332 million. The tax-supported portion is an estimated $1.281 million. The blue bars indicate the expense categories, while the orange denote the amount that is supported through taxation. In 2023, the costs associated with the library operations are split, with a portion under the old current library, approximately 8 months, and some costs designated for the new library, approximately 4 months. The library's main cost is staffing, which is necessary to properly manage the collection, as well as deliver appropriate community services and programs. Moving from a 4,500 square foot building to a 17,000 square foot facility is certain to have operational implications. We have estimated that the new building will have a $1.5 million operational budget. The majority of the increase will be due to a higher staffing level, although there are also additional costs for building maintenance, administration, and programming. The higher costs reflect the library's intention to make best use of the bigger building. The larger library is going to offer more programming opportunities for the Wasaga Beach community. There will be learning labs where residents can develop new skills like sewing or stop animation. With the new children's program room, we can increase the number of learning programs offered, as well as expand our relationship with Early On. The new collaborative spaces will enable Wasaga Beach Public Library staff to develop more community partnerships with ample space for service providers like Empower Simcoe's Housing Access Worker, the Canadian Volunteer Income Tax Program, Georgian College, and more. The library will also be able to support entrepreneurs and local businesses with meeting spaces and office services like printing, scanning, and fax. As well, a larger library will enable staff to grow the materials collection to provide residents with a better selection of information and reading materials. In preparation for the new building, the library is also updating its branding and designing a new website so that we have a fresh new image that better reflects our exciting new space and all that we do for the community. There are significant capital costs built into Wasaga Beach Public Library's 2023 budget to reflect the needs of the new building. The new library is scheduled to be ready for furnishing in September and October, with a proposed opening in November. Capital costs associated with this new building include approximately $4.5 million for construction. As well, there is approximately $1 million designated for furniture and equipment. The 2023 budget also includes $65,000 for the collection materials, including digital books. Library staff are working at expanding the collection to meet library best practices, as well as there is $10,000 in the budget for community equipment to ramp up the number of public stations available in the library. This is an exciting year for Wasaga Beach Public Library. For more than 20 years, the library's board members have been advocating for a larger space in order to better serve the growing Wasaga Beach community. The new library, scheduled to open this fall, will not only be able to provide more services and programs, it will also be a dynamic and a welcoming space that is available for all residents and visitors to enjoy. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship, members of council, and certainly those joining us here this evening. I'm pleased to present the proposed operating and capital budget on behalf of the Public Works Department. As you may know, and as stated earlier, the Public Works Department is responsible for essentially right-of-way activities and general oversight and maintenance. So roads and drainage, water distribution, wastewater collection and treatment, parks division, including trails and beautification. We also have engineering services, which is responsible for the capital design and planning of our major infrastructure projects. They provide services in consultation with the planning department relative to development review, inspection, and they're also responsible for the oversight and administration of our source water protection policies as it relates to new development and mitigating risks associated with new development. We are responsible for the town's transit system as well as fleet management, and again, the delivery of the town's capital works projects. Generally speaking, the overall operations budget remains relatively status quo. However, there are notable highlights that I'd like to advise here this evening, including key staffing needs, which are included in the proposed budget. And all of these are being recommended to ensure that we continue to maintain service levels, both from an operations and maintenance perspective, but also to address changes in legislation and provincial downloading, as in the case of the project engineer position, which will help us manage the downloading from the Ministry of Environment, the oversight and approvals associated with environmental compliance approvals for storm and sanitary systems. Continued residential growth and related infrastructure expansions require staffing levels in the operations for both roads and parks to increase. With respect to engineering studies planned for 23, we have the roads needs study, which is updated every 5 years. And the purpose of this study is to provide an overview of the overall condition of the town's roads system based on factors such as structural adequacy, drainage, surface condition, and ride comfort. And we rely on this information and upload that into our asset management software to accurately define pavement condition indexing and help us prioritize our resurfacing program and rehabilitation projects on an annual basis. We also have the continuation of the town's townwide master drainage plan, which is a multi-year and significant project. This one initiated in 2020. We had our first public meeting to gauge public input back in, I believe it was October of 2022. And we have an upcoming second public meeting, which will help define priorities and establish a capital plan and a plan of action for the community as it relates to our area drainage needs. We also have the 5-year update to the town's water distribution system modeling. And the purpose of this hydraulic model is really to establish a framework to identify future water infrastructure needs and requirements to service the town's 25-year build-out and related population demands. And it helps us, again, define a kind of a path of action for staging of required water infrastructure upgrades. And this model is 100% development charge recoverable. As we move into Wasaga Beach Transit, we are looking to quickly advance a feasibility study to confirm whether we can leverage on-demand software and technology within our existing fixed route system. And we're hoping that this will help us address the demands currently in the East End. And we're trying to leverage, right now, the bus, certainly the main hubs are at the Superstore and Walmart. But as Route 1 specifically, as it travels eastbound up to Archer, there's limited ridership. So we're looking at leveraging software and applications where you can essentially book a reservation for that transit bus, and it can deviate from going up to Archer Road without any need and deviate into some of the developments such as the Elm development to the east or Park Place to the southeast, which currently don't have any service. So that's a priority for us to get out in the first quarter, and we have budget identified to acquire the software and the tools needed to implement that technology. We've had great success with the rollout of the town specialized transit contract since last November, and this will certainly become a continued plan year over year, and that will run concurrently and consistent with the conventional system from 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. And finally, we will be continuing with our transit shelter improvements and expanding those infrastructures throughout town. So we have 2 slated again for this year based on, the locations will be based on ridership trends along the routes 1 and 2. The above noted slide represents the operations budget, which is approximately $18 million, which includes water and wastewater operations. The tax-supported portion of the operations is $7.1 million and represented by the orange bar graph, with the program costs represented by the blue. Moving into the capital plans for transportation and roads, we have a number of carryover projects that are already underway and will continue into 2023, including the completion of Ramblewood Drive, which remains, surface asphalt remains to be placed, as well as boulevard restoration, sidewalks on the north side of Ramblewood between 58th Street and 45th Street, as well as designated bike lanes along Ramblewood. We have the road construction and site preparation associated with the future West End elevated water tower and Public Works Depot. Also, the completion of the detailed design associated with Beach Drive, including property matters, and that is subject to the successful negotiations with the developers in response to the recent limited RFP that was issued. We also have the completion of the detailed design and utility relocation design for Molesey Street between 45th Street and Beechwood Road, which was initiated last year. Of important, certainly significant priority for the department and the community is the next phase of River Road West, and we look forward to urbanizing River Road West between Veterans Way and Blueberry Trails, and this will be a 3-lane cross-section with bike lanes and sidewalks on both sides. And that will be a significant project and will likely span 3 years, so there will be some significant disruption along the way, but we will do our best to mitigate those delays. And we also have several paved shoulder priorities to help improve accessibility and safety along some of the streets, including the west side of 39th Street South, 45th Street North, as well as some shoulder improvements along Molesey Street between 51st and 58th Street. Similarly, in terms of carryovers, our water and wastewater capital program, the majority of these projects are carryovers as well, in terms of primarily being initiated in 2022, and some of them, in fact, were initiated in 2021. They are multi-year programs. So we do have the continued construction of the water pollution control plant biosolids complex upgrades. We're looking to complete the detailed design for the inlet building and bar screen upgrades, as well as retrofits and changeout of the UV system. We will be extending the Beechwood Road trunk water main, and that's essentially from 71st Street through to Thomas Street, and that's a critical loop for the west end and the distribution network. And we also have the local improvement projects, which were initiated this past year, and there's surface asphalt and some boulevard restoration required for Joanne Crescent and Mapleside Drive. And last but not least, we have the final restoration for the Schoonertown Bridge emergency works, which included the force main replacement as well as the water main replacements under the river from Riverbend through to the Oxbow. So there's some final surface asphalt and sidewalk reinstatement to be done, hopefully before the end of June. In terms of the capital budget highlights for drainage, we continue to focus on the flood priorities in the west end as it relates to the Constance Thomas and area drainage improvements and overland flow route. We also have the advancement of the detailed design for some of the local drainage improvements along George, Maryland, and Robert Street, and this is in response to the petition that was received last August. And we will be working collaboratively with the MTO in an effort to get them to form part of the financial commitments that they're responsible for that project, particularly along Beechwood, as Beechwood remains an MTO corridor, and it's not assumed by the municipality, it is an MTO highway. Looking into parks, parks-related projects, we have another very busy year in the Parks Division. First, the existing boat launch at 2nd Street, and specifically the concrete ramp, needs attention. We are going to leverage our design consultants for Beach Area 1 improvements to advance the detailed design for that ramp improvements, as we are currently replacing we're currently designing the new storm outlet for Beach Area 1. And also in terms of construction, we're hoping to leverage the beachfront works when that advances and undertake the ramp improvements concurrently with that first phase. As confirmed in the Parks and Trails Master Plan, there remains considerable gaps in our playground inventories throughout town, and we hope to start to fill those gaps by advancing projects both in the east and west ends of town. First, it is proposed to engage a landscape architect to advance community engagement and detailed design, for the new park block in the Zancor Ramblewood Drive development, and that's immediately east of 58th Street on the north side of Ramblewood. Also, we're proposing to advance the construction of a new park at, I believe the address is 722 River Road East, and that's the intersection of River Road East at Albert Street on the municipally owned lands in the east end. We have the existing playground structure at the Recplex, which was installed in around 2006. It's at the end of its useful life, and we're looking to replace this infrastructure. And as I'd mentioned earlier, it's important to note that there remains significant short and medium-term investments over the next 10 years in our Parks Division to replace aging infrastructure. And we have approximately 14 parks that require attention over the next 10 years. So there's significant investments with our playground infrastructure. Finally, in collaboration with the Economic Development Officer, the wayfinding signage program will continue in 2023, and we'll be rolling out the next phase of our, the destination signs along the critical corridors throughout town. I believe there's upwards of 30 signs to install in this next phase. So this slide represents the capital program at approximately $30.8 million for public works. The largest expenditures in 2023 are the water and wastewater program at $13 million. The administration program is the next highest at $8.5 million, driven by the site preparation and servicing works associated with the West End elevated water tower and depot lands, as well as fleet-related needs. An investment of $5.3 million in roadworks, which is the third largest expenditure for this season, is identified primarily for River Road West. The tax-supported portion of the capital budget is $1.7 million, with the majority of the funding for these works coming from either obligatory reserves, which are comprised of development charges, provincial grants, or the federal gas tax, and general reserves, which is made up of the capital asset replacement reserves. Moving into fleet and related needs, we have a couple of slides to help highlight the budget. The first slide represents, it's hard to read, but the $3.1 million. This actually represents carryover costs associated with fleet acquisitions over previous years. Certainly, like everyone else, the town continues to experience supply chain issues related to vehicles, both from fabrication and acquisitions. And this represents the pending vehicles that were procured both in 2021 and 2022, but have yet to be delivered. And primarily heavy-duty vehicles, we're seeing a lot of our plow and heavy-duty trucks lasting 18 months to 24 months for build time, as well as significant delays with our transit vehicles. As for fleet needs identified specifically for 2022, we have a number of vehicles slated for replacement, as well as new additions to reflect increased staffing and related levels of service. The majority of vehicles are replacing existing assets at the end of useful life. However, we do have additional new light-duty vehicles proposed for engineering, the Sewer and Water Division, Parks, Bylaw, and Facilities. And these additions will align with the proposed departmental staffing increases and levels of service requirements to fulfill their daily roles and assigned duties. And finally, last but certainly not least, under the Fleet Division, we will be issuing an RFP to engage a specialized consultant to help advance the town's transition towards a green or greener fleet and alternatives, and not only for vehicles, but also equipment and small tools. And as part of the Green Fleet strategy, we're hoping to establish, among a number of items, baseline analysis of our current fleet, verify and document the town's fleet greenhouse gas emission values in order to establish trends and recommend actions necessary for the town to move forward towards a carbon neutral fleet, where we will have an assessment done of existing electrical capacity at existing facilities to accommodate the transition to an electric fleet. We will review and recommend charging infrastructure and future expansion plans to address the proposed green fleet growth rate. And we'll also help develop a vehicle and equipment replacement schedule around green initiatives, as well as a funding plan. And that, Your Worship and members of council, generally highlights the notable highlights for the Public Works Department. Douglas.
Good evening, Your Worship, members of council. I'm going to present the planning budget to you and also the economic development budget. And the main role of the planning department is to create development policy to regulate development growth in the town, and also to make sure that the town adheres to the Planning Act when it's reviewing development permit applications. I'd like to draw your attention to the photographs. They're not really planning department related, but they are economic development related. Those photographs were taken as part of the photo stock that we put together for the Four Seasons for the town of Wasaga Beach. We didn't previously have any homemade photo stock. But what's distinct about the photograph is each of the models are town employees. And we're forever grateful that the town employees have volunteered. And if you look at all of the seasonal shots, many of the models are town employees. It shows the great spirit that we have within. So in terms of major costs in this budget, there's the administration. We have several major project updates, the official plan update. There's the West End secondary plan update, which are both official plan related. Not shown here is also the zoning bylaw update, which is significantly out of date. There's also an affordable housing action plan summit, which is identified as one of the council priorities for this term and recognized by all municipalities as an issue of affordable and attainable housing. And finally, on the bulleted list, there's a natural heritage consultations. Previously, the town enjoyed the services of the Conservation Authority to perform that analysis on behalf of the town when we're reviewing development applications, and the province has changed the legislation, and the Conservation Authority can no longer do that. So we will be seeking to hire a consulting firm to do the work for us. It's a revenue-neutral cost. The development industry will pay for that, but money in, money out. In terms of capital, the equipment, I think the total budget for the planning department equipment is $3,500, and it represents rotational life of computer equipment and some office equipment. Somehow somebody slipped a picture of me in this. And actually, the snapshot was taken by our local reporter, Ian Adams, and it's meant to show me as being very knowledgeable looking at a planning document. That's far from the truth. What I was actually thinking is, what am I supposed to do with this old document from 2003? So this budget will rectify that. And the current official plan dates to 2003. The current zoning bylaw dates to 2003. Almost every development application that comes in, they're asking for zoning variances, and the bylaw obviously needs an update. We're seeing an enhanced number of committee of adjustment applications from just local residents who want to perform improvements on their property, and they need a minor variance to do that. So we're looking to update the zoning bylaw to alleviate some of that cost and effort by the local taxpayers. Very difficult to read, but there's a little table chart at the top, and you can just barely make out ZBA, OPA, and SP. That reflects new legislation that's being imposed on lower tier and municipalities by the province, which will increase our costs. And it's part of the More Homes for Everybody legislation. What the province has legislated is that we are to perform and render Planning Act decisions within very limiting timelines. And much of that time is out of our control. So what we will see in our budget is an increase in our revenues. We've enhanced the revenue or the application fees to make up for that, and we will be streamlining our process as part of that as we go. So that's kind of the reference to the Bill 109 and Bill 23 bullets on the slide. And the other key bullets are the West End Secondary Plan Study, the Affordable Housing and Natural Heritage, which I previously spoke about in the earlier slides. The total budget for the planning department is the second bullet, 1.9 million. Tax-supported amount is 1.2 million. And the revenue from application fees will make up the rest of the budget, which is approximately 718,000. The 124,000 represents the amount of money revenue from the increase in the application fees that was implemented this year. The major cost for the official plan update is 100,000. The zoning bylaw update is 95,000. Both of these are carryover projects from last year. Not shown here is also the West End Secondary Plan, which is $130,000. All three of these documents, planning staff will have in a draft form this year, and for presentation to the public and input from the public this year. And the intent is to have recommendations to council early in the first quarter of 2024. Other initiatives, I've already mentioned that we're doing department modernization and streamlining to meet with the new provincial legislation. And through the planning operations budget, you can see that most of the major roles are partly supported by taxation or under administration wholly supported by taxation. And finally, moving on to economic development, the total budget for economic development is $505,000, and tax supported is $479,000. Staffing cost is a little over half, about half of the cost. There is one new position proposed. It's a manager of economic development with a start date of June of this year, so $83,000. In terms of capital programs, Kevin had mentioned already there's a partnership between economic development and public works in getting the new wayfinding signage installed. So the $200,000, $100,000 of that is for the new signs at all the new waypoints, the major intersections in town, and the other $100,000 is intended for a new entryway sign for the town of Wasaga Beach. And finally, there's equipment. of $22,000. That's broken up into two key items. The first one is a presentation booth. When we haven't been attending any, because of COVID-19, we haven't been attending doctor recruitment and things like that. And we haven't needed the booth, but we now know that we will be using it. So it's a display booth. It'll be a multi-purpose booth. You can also use it for key announcements as a backdrop when council makes those announcements. And finally, the remainder of the $22,000 is for new computer and office furniture to support the new the economic development manager. And that, Your Worship and Council, wraps up the planning and economic development budget.
Thank you, Doug. I'm gonna do something a little out of sequence here. Can you just back up a couple of slides, Doug? That one right there. That face to me looks like it's saying I need a drink. I'm making a little fun of that because I think it's an appropriate time to announce that Doug, a very key and integral part of the team of the town of Wasaga Beach for many years now, has decided to retire and to move on to the next stage of his life with his lovely wife Moira and his wonderful son, and do some sailing and so on and so forth. And you've been a key player here, Doug, for a long time. And I think what we'll miss the most about you is your smiling face and your ability to keep calm, resolute, and to just carry on no matter how hard the grind is every day, and to get the job done. And that's going to be some big, big shoes to fill. But we wish you all the best, and we thank you. And keep your phone on, we might need you. Thank you. Jocelyn, back to you.
Thank you, Your Worship. Okay, we're to the last part of our budget presentations, and Mr. Rogers is absent at this time, so he's asked me to just provide information for his slides. So for the building and, just let me move down here. The highlights for the building department are focused on the new building portal, which is offered through CityView software. And the team is tweaking the process as customers are beginning to utilize the new feature. In 23, excuse me, there will be an additional external inspection services as the department shares this service with the fire department. There are digitization projects planned during the year to make information more readily available to staff and improve the efficiency of processing. And we have in the revenues projected based on 225 permits, 630,000, and we are drawing on the reserve funds this year for the building department expenses of 400,000. We also have in the capital program a hybrid vehicle, which is a carryover from 2022 at 65,000. And the electric vehicles, there are 2 planned, and we have an estimated budget of 160,000. There will also be some planned building department renovations for 100,000. The building department has a self-sustaining budget and does not use taxation. Under the Building Code Act, fees for services are charged to cover all required services. As well, some of the revenues generated are contributed to reserves to support leaner years, such as 2023, when the transfers come from reserves. The main cost in the budget is staffing, and internal transfers are provided to other support departments. So this concludes the department presentation portions of the budget, and this last slide is on our forecast information. And the purpose of this table is to show the operating and capital budgets for 2023 and the next 4 years. It also shows the expected tax rate percentage change in red. And this forecast provides some information about expected budget requirements based on known capital projects and operations cost that we see on the horizon. You can see in this slide, we are at 8.6 in 2023, with a forecast for 24 of 3.89, and in 25, 3.91. For 26 is 4.19, and for 27, 2.85. This concludes the budget review presentations, and I would like to thank the budget team, which includes staff and council members, for all of their interactions in the budget process. I would also like to say thank you to our budget analyst, Cindy Moore, as she has a key role throughout the process, helping prepare the budgets and assist staff members and bring the budget document to its final state. I would like to thank the public that have engaged in the online budget commentary and are with us here this evening. And Your Worship, this concludes the evening's presentations. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Treasurer. So welcome to everybody here. This public meeting to obtain input on the proposed 23 operating capital budgets, and of this public meeting published in the Saga newspaper on March 1st, 2023, and on March 15th, 2023. It was also posted on the town's website. Thank you. The purpose of the public meeting is to explain to the public the components of and the makeup of the proposed 2023 budget, operating and capital budgets, and 4-year operating and capital forecasts. The budget process started in November of 2022 with staff undertaking a review of various factors that would influence the 2023 budget. Over January and February, submissions by departments were reviewed and revised by the CAO, Treasurer, and Budget Financial Analyst, and presented to members of council. In March, staff presented council with a budget that reflected an 8.6% tax rate increase. And based on the new taxation rate of household in Wasaga Beach, with an assessment of $333,000 in 2023, they will see an increase of approximately $171 in their municipal portion of taxes. When combined with the county and education portions of the tax bill, the estimated blended tax rate percentage of 5.9%, the property owner with an assessment of $333,000 will see an increase of $203 in 2023. The town has been able to keep tax rate increases reasonable over the years, and this year's proposed increase is reflection of the town's commitments to complete past approved Arena Library project, responding to continued growth and planning for the future. As you know, the council and department heads are here tonight, and they have presented their budget. And I would now ask our deputy clerk to please announce our speakers.
Thank you, Your Worship. We do have a number of residents registered to speak this evening. As such, we'd like to remind everyone, if you have heard your question asked, to kindly please not ask it again, and to please adhere to the 3-minute time limit in place this evening. So, Your Worship, I'll begin with the members who are joining us via Zoom, and at this time, I will call upon Elaine Mundell.
Welcome, Elaine.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and councillors. I would like to express my disappointment in this draft of the municipal budget. You were elected to represent all residents of Wasaga Beach based on your campaign rhetoric of openness and keeping taxes affordable. Now that you're sitting on the other side of the bench, your tones have changed immensely. Residents of Wasaga Beach trusted you. Was this trust misplaced? Many residents are on fixed incomes, including seniors, long-time, and even new residents. In fact, for many residents, you are double taxing them by suggesting they cover the service charge by paying by credit card. It is despicable a mayor would make a disparaging remark about the people he is representing and how they manage to pay their bills. Councillors, do you want to be remembered as being supporters of all the residents of Wasaga Beach or not? Please revisit the budget numbers. There's a huge difference between wants and needs. We are a small community and we should not be trying to keep up with large urban centers. Oh, by the way, another idea that was not thought out for Wasaga Beach is the 15-minute community. I, as a senior citizen, will not be able to get my groceries or prescriptions.
Excuse me, Elaine. We are here to talk about the budget, not the 15-minute communities, which is not the case, I will add, and was never the case for this council. So I'm going to ask you to please speak to the budget.
Okay, I'm finished. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Thank you, Your Worship. Next on Zoom, I have Karen Schilscher.
Good evening, Karen, and welcome. I think you have...
Good evening. I'm interested to know what the estimated annual revenue and costs will be for the twin pad / library will be once it is in operation.
Madam Treasurer, do you want to answer that question?
Thank you, Your Worship. The increased costs for the library is approximately 1.5 million to operate the library, and for the arena, it is approximately 1 million.
And like revenue and costs, what are we looking at for both? Like you quoted 1.5 million for the library, 1 million for the arena. Is that cost or revenue?
That is, through Your Worship, that is the total cost for the two operations. And there is revenues for the arena, and there's just a small grant portion of revenue for the library. So the library has revenues of about 30,000, maybe a little bit more than that, but not much. And then for the arena, if I may, I'll just defer over to our recreations director to give the revenue number for the arena.
Thank you, Madam Treasurer.
Certainly, through you, Mayor Smith. The grand total for ice revenues, which makes up the majority, there are some room rental revenues in the existing arena. We have projected a small amount for the few months we expect to be open at the new facility across the road, but the gross revenues of the two would be 123,000 plus, oh no, I'm sorry, that's incorrect. 89,000 is projected for the new arena for the couple months. It's November and December 2023, and an additional 353,000 projected for the existing arena for roughly 10 months of operation.
What would be the annualized amounts?
That's a very good question, if I may, through you, Mayor Smith. We are yet to operate 2 ice pads for a full year. So the estimates are going to be better projected into the 2024 budget. It's still very new, and we only expect a couple months of operation. So I could only be guessing in order to give you an accurate projection of what the 2024 budget revenue will be in the new arena.
Okay, thank you. I do have one more question. I'm wondering what is right now the projected cost of the new twin pad arena and library? Like the building, capital cost.
Through Your Worship, are you asking about the building, the building itself?
Yes.
So in the 23 budget, there is 18 million to complete the arena portion of the project, and there is 4.5 million to complete the library portion of the building. And
Right.
the total
Yes,
budget-
I realize that, but I'm looking for the total cost once everything is complete. Obviously, it wasn't just built in 2023.
Yes. So the arena project has a budget of 60 million, and we will be coming in within that budget. And that included the land purchase, the buildings, the furniture and equipment. So everything in total for the project will come through. The land was approximately 5 million, and the building and outfitting of the building in total cost is about 54 million.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Karen. Madam Deputy Clerk?
Thank you, Your Worship. I did have 3 other members registered on Zoom, but perhaps I'll call to see if they're here in the audience instead, because I don't see them online. First, I have Carrie Plater. Okay, next I have James Ostoff. And finally, for the Zoom, Richard Staples. Okay, so Your Worship, I'll move on to the members who are registered here tonight, starting with Murray Wilson.
Thank you. Good evening, Murray, and welcome.
First of all, I'd like to thank the finance manager, and finance director, and all staff. It was a great presentation, an awful lot to absorb in that time. But this is not to say that I agree with the final number. This is just the presentation I'm talking about. The council members, you've all come off the campaign trail recently where you made lots of talks, lots of promises. Promises like it, and maybe some of you will remember these, maybe some of you won't. I will always work to keep the taxes as low as possible. It was in most of yours. I will work with council to mitigate tax increases by adjusting the mill rate. That was in relation to the MPAC possible changes. And 3, will not waste taxpayers' money on legal and consulting fees and nice to have things, but not necessary. I think you all can agree that those were on your rates. And based on the draft budget proposal, I'm wondering if any of you actually listened to the residents or if you just talked. You know, think about that for a minute. Were those just hollow promises you made? Were they a pack of lies? This council was very fortunate to step into the leadership role of a town that is very good financial shape, great reserves, many infrastructure projects completed or in progress. I have heard our neighboring towns are very envious of our financial position. Our finance director has told us on numerous occasions that our finances are healthy. What we really need is not an 8.6 tax increase. We need good management of our assets. And by the way, that 8.6 gets tossed around as a tax increase, but when you annualize that, it's probably more like 11 or 12%. And that's what will carry over year after year after year. You on council know the status of the residents better than the mayor or the CAO. They are your neighbors, they are your friends, they are your family. And many of them are hurting coming out of the pandemic. Some of them are hurting pretty bad. Look at the increased needs in the food bank. Every week, the numbers go up. Some of you work there, you know that. Homeless numbers are reaching scary heights. All of these are indicators of tough times ahead. Tough times not only ahead, tough times now. These call for action, the need to keep taxes low and to a minimum. We need a council that can manage and prioritize projects so that we can stay within a reasonable 2 or 3% tax increase on top of what we normally pay, not the record proposal presented in this draft. Mayor, it's time to get real. You got to cut out the slush funds. Freeze or delay the ridiculous hiring plan and eliminate the nice to have but unnecessary items. That will go a long way to getting us back to something that's more reasonable. Mayor, you say you want to bridge the gap with the town. You want the town folks to work together in a non-combative, cooperative team that can serve all the residents. Great. But your words do not reflect your actions. Show us you're serious by presenting a budget, a sound financial budget that perhaps the town folks can get behind and support you. I was going to ask one other question because the agenda is a little confusing. The agenda, I'm always very pleased to be able to come here tonight and just to express my thoughts. When I saw the agenda for the first time yesterday, I was confused because it said you were going to have a meeting, this meeting, an explanation, and go right into a council meeting and vote. If that's the case, that's ridiculous. That means it's just nothing but a showpiece here. I hope that's not right.
That is not the case, Murray. The council will not be voting on this budget until the 13th.
Thank you for clearing that up. That's my piece. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Murray. Next, Madam Deputy Clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship. Next, I have Kathleen Caswell.
Good evening, Kathleen, and welcome. I'm going to ask you to turn your, there we go. Good.
Good evening, Your Worship, Deputy Mayor Snell and the councillors. Yes, I do want to thank all the work that went into these presentations. They were very well done, very professional. A lot of material, so don't have it very absorbed yet. But I did find myself a little disappointed until towards the end, because I didn't hear the word sustainability, I didn't hear climate change, I didn't hear some of the words I was hoping to hear, and hopefully I will hear over the next year. Until towards the end when Mr. Lalonde did bring up the electric fleet plan and hybrids. So that is one area that is obviously dear to my heart, and glad to hear that that's coming along. Many municipalities are using a concept called the climate lens, which means that all their decisions, all their budgeting, all their decisions is looked through a climate lens. So they're constantly asking themselves, is this going to be sustainable? And is this going to affect the environment in a positive way or a negative way? So I think that's an area that I'm hoping to see more of this year, because I really appreciate the fact that the priorities of the council include the leadership in climate change. That's amazing. I didn't see it reflected too much yet. It could be hidden in the numbers somewhere. I know that there's going to be an advisory council, which will be very, very important for us. So I do have this question, but it's a big question, so and it's really related to the priorities, and which is can we speak? Where in the budget does it speak to the green initiatives that have been listed in the priorities? The transition to a green fleet was mentioned, the green energy alternatives at the beachfront, active transportation infrastructure, green development standards, green retrofits to town buildings. So if sometime in the future it could be shown to me where there's numbers in the budget, I know a lot of these initiatives are going to span over your term and even beyond your term. So I don't expect everything in the 2023 budget, but it's hard for me to see it happening in this 2023 budget. Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Deputy Clerk?
Thank you, Worship. Next, I have Mr. Glenn Smale.
Good evening, Glenn, and welcome.
Mr. Mayor, Deputy Mayor, Council, and staff. First of all, I'd like to thank you all for making this a welcoming atmosphere back in council chambers again. It's nice to be able to ask a question without having it being vetted before I got here, so thank you. I represent the Wasaga Beach Ratepayers Association. I think you've answered most of my questions, Andrew, but I will ask a couple. There are certain impacts on the large budget increase. We're experiencing inflation, pricing, and practically everything we need, including utilities, fuel, et cetera. What is the estimated percentage increase due to the inflation in this budget? Do we have any idea, sort of, Jocelyn? Please.
Madam Treasurer?
Thank you, Your Worship. So generally, the inflation is running higher than the 5.9%. That's your general CPI index. We are experiencing some increases of 28% on the construction materials, and our insurance costs have gone up. I think it's around 33%. So we've had very significant high inflationary factors in our budget, but we don't have the exact inflation number, but that gives you some estimate. Thank you.
Thank you, I appreciate it. Another question. We've always been concerned about the construction costs of the library and arena. Now, we have, I believe it's a $32 million long-term debenture debt. Was that interest rate locked in at the last council, or are we having to get a new one now, new rate?
Through your worship, we have not locked the debenture in at this time. We have used construction financing, and we have used internal financing to limit the construction draws as the interest rate has gone up. Once the building is at substantial completion, we then have an opportunity to move into a longer-term debenture, and we can pay down the construction financing with any excess funds that we have available. So it's quite a flexible financing tool that we have used, and we have 5 years from the time we took the first draw on the financing before we have to actually commit the long-term debenture. We took our first financing in March of 2022. So we still have some time available to choose the right financing for the building.
Thank you. I think you've answered this question, and I apologize. The budget increase created by the library arena debt costs as well. I think you answered that with the 1.5 for library, 1 point for the arena. Is that right?
Through your worship, thank you. I'd like to make a correction to what I said for the arena. It was 1.8 million cost for the arena, 1.5 million for the library.
Okay, thank you. And then my last question, but I believe our CAO answered it earlier. There was a significant increase in payroll, and I guess that was because of the staff turnover, and we're now replacing people, and now we're going to have to look for a new planner. And congratulations on your retirement. Enjoy it. So thank you for allowing me to ask these questions, and again, thank you for allowing us to be inclusive in this community. Thank you.
Thank you, Glenn. Madam Deputy Clerk?
Thank you, Worship. Mr. Peter Gribbon.
Good evening and welcome, Peter.
Good evening, Mayor Smith and members of council and staff. I agree, it was an excellent presentation, good information, an awful lot to digest. When it comes right down to it, no taxpayer wants an 8.6% tax increase. Nobody wants to vote for that. But as usual, social media in our town is rampant with lots of conjecture, misinformation and misunderstanding. People expect this budget will be passed regardless of this discussion tonight or what Mayor Smith has said. I disagree with that. I think it needs to be contemplated a bit more after the feedback tonight. There are people on social media that seemingly were very supportive of the $60 million spend on the Arena Library, and yet they're in shock now that this needs to be in the budget. So, there's lots of misinformation out there for various reasons. My first question is, we've seen lots of tax dollars spent on consultants, legal fees, especially on the town-owned beachfront properties leading up to the proposed sale, which fell through. why wasn't this negotiation extended so we could finally see the start of true redevelopment of this prime property? I mean, can anyone, Ms. Smith, could you comment on that?
I would love to comment on that at this point, Peter, but this is a budget meeting, and unfortunately, that is not in the budget, so we're going to leave that for another time.
It is going to impact our budget as well. Anyway, next question. There are two specific challenges that I see facing our town that will impact future taxes, in our opinion, added on to this tax increase. The removal of development charges and the impact updated property assessments that are coming. They're delayed, but they're coming. In addition, DCs are in the development charges are in the future budget forecast on Appendix B, which is a bit confusing to me if we're not going to be allowed to charge them. So can you comment on the impacts that we can hopefully see for coming budgets?
Madam Treasurer, maybe you want to touch on that, and then maybe planning or the CAO could touch on it as well.
Thank you, Your Worship. So for the development charges, we will still be collecting development charges, but however, there will be some impact on the timing of when those development charges are collected, and that will have an impact starting in 2025. We do, when we forecast the collection of development charges, we forecast on the low end. Generally, we actually collect more DCs than what we include in our forecast to be able to be conservative in our approach. And I think that answers, did you have a question on impact?
Yeah, impact. I mean, you know, we know that property assessments have been delayed.
Thank you. So the forecast that was put on the screen already considers the phasing coming back in. So when you see those percentages that I spoke to earlier, that's already considered the phasing in being received back for the town.
Okay, so it sounds like we're not in for another shock then, hopefully. Last question. While there are considerable costs impacting this budget based on decisions made by the last Chamber Council, we'd like to know what this council's commitment will be to bring taxation back into line during your term and provide some relief to the taxpayers of Wasaga Beach. Those rates that we saw on the assessments or the assessments for the future years, they look pretty good compared to the 8.6%, but how are we going to get there?
Madam Treasurer?
Thank you, Your Worship. So when we forecast these budgets, we look at our operating costs that we're expecting to have in the next 4 years. We look at our capital projects that we have forecasted out over the next 10 years, and we estimate our assessment-based growth based on normal assessment that we would receive in the town, and from that we can forecast what we project those tax rates to be. So it's based on reasonable estimates of what we expect to have happen.
Thank you. That's all my questions. Thank you, Jocelyn. Thank you, Mayor Smith and
Thank
Council.
you. Thank you, Peter. Madam Deputy Clerk?
Thank you, Worship. Next, I have Fiona Reiner.
Good evening and welcome, Fiona.
Good evening, and thank you all for all the information. I've tried my best to go through all these sheets of paper, and I may make some mistakes, but I have a few things I'd like to say. So I am Fiona Reiner. I have lived in this town for 20 years. I will focus primarily on certain proposed operating expenditures, beginning with the addition of executive staff, including a deputy CAO, in-house legal counsel, 3 general managers, plus a couple of other positions that appear to be enhanced positions. This seems pretty grandiose for a town of 23,000. The price tag for half a year is 1.4 million, which annualized is 2.8 million. I don't think our population has grown enough over the last 4 years to justify this new organizational structure. I personally have lived through many of the restructuring years when senior layers were reduced to create efficiencies, not added. Overall expenditures, including only that 6 months of the above staff, are to increase by 6.5 million. So add that 1.4, the other half, that's in effect 7.9 million. I consider that a big jump. We're all painfully aware of the rise in the costs of basic necessities such as food, natural gas, electricity, and now many families will also be hit with higher mortgage costs. Many older adults that bought homes several years ago have actually lost a spouse and are now struggling on a single fixed income. A property tax hike will just exacerbate their struggles. Even $17 a month, which would be the blended amount, means cutting out on some food. It might be easy to point to the new library and arena as a cause, but not as far as capital costs go. I'm seeing pretty much the same capital expenditures over this year and last year. I understand there will be operating expenditures and there may be increased interests and there's the inflation you've talked about, but is that close to justifying a tax hike of 8.6%? The same can be said for infrastructure. There were some major projects completed, such as a massive bridge repair, road widening, and so on. And so ongoing infrastructure projects should be manageable without a huge increase. Last year, an audit showed the town to be in excellent financial condition. A modest tax increase should be enough to maintain that excellent status. Now is not the time for would-be nice extravagancies. And then next year's increase, of course, will compound because it will be based on the higher amount this year. There appears to be a lack of awareness of this proposed tax increase when I talk to people. The room is quite empty, too. I think it's been kept fairly low profile, even though I know you mentioned it's been in the papers a couple of times, but I'm surprised how few people seem to know about this. And the Beach Booster, the ratepayers group have not been very loudly talking about this. Many who voted in your favor will be blindsided and will be hurt financially. This proposed budget, in my mind, does not resonate with fiscal responsibility and sustainability, nor with maintaining lower levels of taxation compared to similar surrounding municipalities. Thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you, Fiona. Madam Deputy Clerk.
Thank you, Worship. Next, I have Cliff Preston.
Good evening and welcome, Cliff.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you to members of council for this opportunity. Very refreshing. And to staff who worked hours and hours putting these numbers together, all I can say to you is
I was going to ask you, yeah, perfect,
they've
thank
come
you.
from members or taxpayers around town, so they're not necessarily mine. The first one involves a topic that was not listed in your council's priorities as you showed them here tonight on the slide. It's the walk-in clinic. Are we pursuing a revival of this project, and is there appropriate funding in place for this project?
So, Cliff, yes, it's one of council's priorities to reopen the walk-in clinic that was closed by the last council. There is some funding in the budget through the council priorities, I think, which is $450,000 or $500,000, but I'll let our treasurer speak a little further to that.
Thank you, Your Worship. In the budget, there is $25,000 for the walk-in clinic as we just start the process this year, looking at reopening it. The full costs of running the walk-in clinic run around approximately $180,000 to $200,000 a year, and we'll see that in future budgets as we move forward with getting the project ready to open.
Excellent, thank you. My next question is, has the town tried to search out other opportunities to earn income from sources beyond the taxpayers? And are there any examples of this? For example, replacing the lost grant on the arena, library arena.
Madam Treasurer?
Thank you, Your Worship. Any opportunities for new revenue streams have been identified in each of the individual budgets. There is not anything, I'm not quite sure what you were referencing on the grant for the, or you're referencing the fact that we did not receive grant funding.
Initially, we had a grant on the paper, but it did not materialize. That's correct.
Yes, so we have not done anything further with that at this time, but we are looking at new grant opportunities for other upcoming projects.
Okay. Next, what will happen to Stars Arena once the new facility is up and running? Are there any offsets to the high cost of operating the new arena? Would it be possible to make use of it, or would the land be sold? My additional comment on that one is, I believe there's a $75,000 budget item for the evaluation of future prospects for the old arena. This activity was included in the budget of the previous council, and my question is, was the evaluation done? And if so, why are we budgeting $75,000 to do the evaluation again?
Madam Treasurer?
Thank you, Your Worship. So the $75,000 has not been spent yet.
No.
It is there in the 23 budget. As we recognize that we need to evaluate that facility and decide what the right opportunity is as to whether or not it has a use or is not to be used for that purpose, and the land could be considered surplus. There are many different options that will be evaluated in that study, and we'll bring them forward at that time.
Okay. Lastly, I have a small item. It's only $10,000, but every 10,000 counts. And this deals with an item for the purchase of a harness for the new arena. We have only 25 skaters signed up, to the best of my knowledge, most of whom are young recreational skaters, and they're not competitive skaters. It's unlikely, in my opinion, that they will be attempting jumps that require a harness, and there's also a liability issue dealing with a harness. Is it viable to budget for an item of $10,000 for 125 children when we have many, many other children in town who go to bed hungry? Those are my questions, and I thank you.
Thank you, Cliff. Did you want to touch on that, maybe Chris?
Certainly, it was a discussion that happened in council very recently, and I have gone back to try and get a fulsome understanding. What I've learned is that there are roughly 75 skaters, half of which use that harness system in our existing arena every single time they skate. So you're correct that it's not for the majority of youth, but from what I've understood, sort of the basic skating lesson program elevates kids into hockey or advanced figure skating. And when you start up into the advanced figure skating programs, it's an essential tool. This is a term I learned from the local figure skating club. And it's roughly 35 local kids, and then outside kids are coming here and use our harness as well. That's it.
Okay, thank you for that. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Cliff. Madam Deputy Clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship. Next, I have Victoria State.
Good evening and welcome, Victoria.
Good evening. Can you hear me? Good evening, Mayor Smith, members of council, and citizens of Wasaga Beach. Let me introduce myself. My name is Victoria State. I'm here to talk about the tax increase you're proposing for 8.6%. 55% of the population of Wasaga Beach is seniors. Approximately 25% are working professionals with families moving into this beautiful community who cannot access the housing market due to rising interest rates, trying to raise families at the same time using more than 50% of their income for the living expenses. If this tax is approved, you're going to be asking your constituents that voted you into office to dig deeper. When the cost of gas, food, rent are at an all-time high, cost of food is almost unattainable, and forcing people to access the food bank. The numbers at the food bank are an alarming rate and isn't going down anytime soon. Yes, you can say, hop on transit. The town is growing. Routes need to be added and extend to routes. The last stop going east on County Road 92 is at the old arena. Young families that are one-car family have to walk with their young children to the bus stop from Village Gate and back. The last stop on Mosley before the casino is Lorna Dunes. Passengers are walking from the ice cream shop, crossing over and around about and up the 4-lane highway to get to either to work or enjoy a day out. That's a disaster in the making. I get it. It's all about timing to get to one end to the other. There has to be a better option. Thank you for that option, Kevin. This is not about money. It's about safety of the passengers trying to get to the doctor's appointment or going to the casino without dodging cars on the way to work. When the tourists start coming up, parking is going to be a premium. Transit makes sense. Seniors are living in small communities. Years ago, they sold their homes in the big city, moved up here to enjoy their golden years, and will be affected by the tax hike increase of 8.6%. This could potentially put them in jeopardy of staying in their own homes. As I drive around town, I'm already seeing seniors panhandling and forced to choose between food and heat. What will happen when you increase the tax? These people are your neighbors, your friends, and the people that voted you into office. Once again, members of council, come together, decide on what the tax rate should be. Think about how it will affect everyone, because this is the highest tax in the county. You said you would be fiscally responsible. Listen to people's concerns. And as sworn members of this office, you have an obligation to the people of Wasaga Beach to put their needs ahead of your wants. Please reconsider your decision of raising the taxes at 8.6%. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Victoria. Madam Deputy Clerk.
Thank you, Worship. Next, I have Paul Wilkes.
Evening, Paul, and welcome.
Good evening, thank you. It's good to have the opportunity to share, and congratulations, Council, on the budget. But there are some things that I want to raise concern about, and I'm not going to mention anything in particular, any isolated thing, but the priorities of the Council when you're considering the budget, amongst them, you silenced somebody who asked about the 15-minute neighbourhoods. Now, I understand that I'm not sure where in the budget this would be, but I was so shocked when I saw that in the priorities of the council, this council, because I've been reading that the World Economic Forum is...
Sorry, Paul.
I'll leave that just a moment.
No, but we're here to speak about the budget, not about the 15-minute communities, because we've already clarified that in our last council meeting, that is clearly a misunderstanding. We are not creating a 15-minute community. We used the wrong words. We should have talked about a community, a walkability community or a walkable community. So we have dealt with that, but we're here today to deal about the budget, and the 15-minute communities that you speak of is not in the budget.
Okay, I didn't see anything in the budget for that. But one of the other thing that is in the budget, and I know it's a hot topic, is the green issue. And one of the things that I find disturbing about it, I understand we need to take care of the environment, but you know, we as human beings don't have control of the environment. It's God who has control of the environment. And if you look at the green, the way in which the vehicles are made and some of the way in which the raw materials are got for these vehicles, it's disturbing. And so I don't see those vehicles as being green. Besides, I don't think the hydro could cope with what is planned for the future. So I am concerned that we think carefully about what is done as far as the converting to a green fleet, because I honestly don't believe that it is green. And I ask you to carefully consider and recognize that yes, we have to take control of the environment, we have responsibilities, but some of the information that is being given is misleading at best. And I just ask you as a council to really consider that and reconsider and be careful in how you apply. I agree with conservation, I agree with those things, but I am concerned about this idea of green. When we talk about energy and people talk about climate change, well, I remember in the 60s they were talking about the new ice age. Yes, climate changes through the decades, through the centuries, but I ask you to carefully consider and not go too far ahead too quickly on that. The other one thing that I would ask also is, because the budget, I understand some of the reasons, and thank you for the explanation that's been given, but to ask people who pay by credit card to pay an extra fee, that does not seem fair. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Madam Deputy Clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship. Next, I have David Matthews. Okay, not seeing David Matthews. I will call on Ron Ego.
Good evening and welcome, Ron.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Council. Thank you, staff. Long job, but very well done. It's an opportunity to be able to speak here again. The last time I was in this council chambers, I was told to be quiet, and I left. Anyhow, it is a privilege and an honor, and I'm going to try and keep it that way. I am concerned about some of the comments about the budget. And the reason being for that is, if the people that are against the budget, I understand. And I understand that you're upset about the increase. But stop and think for a minute that if you were to take out the 4.8% for the arena and library, what would the budget be? The budget would be 4%. 4% would be right in line with every other municipality in this province. Why I'm saying that is this council did not inherit the other inherited the other 4.8%. It's not their fault that you have to pay for that now. It's a fault of the other council. And the reason I'm saying that is the other council put this into effect without any guarantees or any commitment from the federal and provincial government, which we argued about for I don't know how long, and was in place to get the proper funding that would have helped and would have cost the taxpayers a lot less money or anything. If that funding would have come through, the money that they would have got from the provincial government and the federal government would have been one-third, one-third. The taxpayers would have been only responsible for one-third. And I don't know why you're getting upset at this council, because they're only trying to clean up the mess that was created. And what I'm saying by that is, first of all, I'm not happy about the arena. I'm not happy about the library. But it's done. It's over with. We have to pay for it. So what do? We move on. I have a question for the treasurer, and that is just a yes or no answer, if you don't mind. Is it possible to take any money from the reserves to pay this down?
Madam Treasurer?
Through your worship, we are using some money from the reserves to pay some of this cost, and there is the option for council to consider whether they wanted to take more from the reserves to reduce costs, but would not be able to pay this entire bill through reserves. Sorry.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
I appreciate that. Well, thanks for the answer. Anyhow, my opinion is that, and it's just a suggestion, that the town of Wasaga Beach, as everybody knows, is in pretty good financial situation. I would seriously suggest that maybe we have 88 million or whatever it might be in reserves. Take 25 or 30 million, pay down the arena and the library. We're still going to have 40 million in reserves, and that's still probably healthier than most municipalities there is around. So I think that maybe, and in 2 years, when we build them back up again, or 3 years, we could pay it off. I think that maybe council should take a look at this, because it's something that I think is feasible, and without hurting the taxpayers the way they're being hurt. But please don't blame this council for the mess that was made. That's all I'm saying. And the other part that I would like to say is, the reason I was never for the arena and the library, and I'm going to say this point blank, the arena to me is a non-functional piece of work. And I will say that because unless you build a proper arena today, you will never, ever, ever make it pay. And that arena was scheduled in 1914 to 18 to be a 5,000-seat arena, which would have paid for itself and would have given much more use to the residents of Wasaga Beach, and it would have helped tourism. Sorry.
Thank you, Ron. I'm going to ask you to stay on the budget, and if you've
Why?
if you've got anything to add, we'll be happy to hear it.
No, you won't.
All right. Thank you, Ron.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, council.
Madam Treasurer, I'm going to ask you just to respond to the numbers that Mr. Ego was using with respect to the reserves, because I think that's important for people to be clear on and understand. I appreciate Ron giving us a whole lot of extra money, but I don't know where it is.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, it would be wonderful if we were able to use those reserves and help pay down this bill. However, those reserves, many of them are restricted. And so our obligatory reserves, that's what the obligatory reserves are, is they're restricted for their use. And there's only so much money for the arena and the library out of that portion of the reserves. Then within our general reserves, a large portion of our general reserves are our water sewer reserves, which are also restricted and can only be used for the water sewer infrastructure. So when we remove those restricted reserves and actually look at what's really available to the town, we have a much smaller number of funding that's really truly available that could even be considered.
Thank you, Madam Treasurer. Madam Deputy Clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship. The final registration I have for this evening is Sylvia Bray.
Good evening and welcome, Sylvia.
Thank you. Before I started, I just had a question for the clerk, because when I downloaded this agenda on March the 25th, point 2 had said that there would be a vote tonight by the Joint Committee of Council on the budget. So I'm just asking when this agenda changed and how we would be made aware of those changes in future.
Madam Clerk?
Thank you, Your Worship. The error was discovered yesterday. An addendum was put out, and it was updated on social media and put out to everybody that has subscribed to the agenda.
Okay, thank you. I missed it, so I apologize. I'm not sure if I talk about it tonight, but if I do, I apologize in advance. Mr. Mayor, members of council, I stand before you today to share concerns about the proposed budget increase of 8.6%. It's a budget that adds $6.5 million to the annual operating cost of our town. Let me point out, $6.5 million is 14.4% more than the operating budget of 2022. $6.5 million is shocking to anyone that compares apples to apples. This concern is not just mine. As a long-term resident and business owner, I talk with many people in our beautiful town who are shocked and appalled that a new, mostly inexperienced council would even consider an 8.6% tax increase acceptable in the current economic climate. A few residents, both publicly and privately, have asked me not to speak today, but more have thanked me for being willing to stand up and share, as they too are very worried about this budget, but many are too afraid to speak out and ask the tough questions. As a former member of council, I have 8 years of municipal budget experience, and to not share my grave concerns about the arrogance and extravagance of this budget would be, in my opinion, irresponsible. When I see adding a new top layer to the organizational chart, when I see creating a second CAO's position, we're the only one in Simcoe County suggesting that this is a necessity, reducing the staff working hours when others are working harder and longer to feed their families, adding in-house legal counsel, and creating council expense accounts. I'm struggling. When I asked why I bother, the answer is very simple. Bad things can happen if good people quietly sit by and just watch it. Every single one of you sitting at the council table today had promises such as keeping tax increases low, better fiscal responsibility, and said things such as reasonable taxes are an important part of attracting people to Wasaga Beach. This is all in your election literature. Have you all forgotten the promises you made when you were asking for our vote? Many residents are struggling to make ends meet. I and many just like me believe this budget focuses on the council wants, your wish list, rather than restricting the increase to residents' needs, the needs of all 25,000 residents of our beautiful town. You've increased staffing by $1.4 million this year. This makes approximately 6% of this tax increase, 6% of the 8.6. It will cost close to $3 million in 2024 when those new positions are annualized. You've allocated over $500,000, or more than 2% of this tax increase, to council initiatives. I believe this was referred to as a council slush fund at the all candidates meeting. Are the new $35,000 council expense accounts to be known as personal slush funds? I and many more like me believe that to approve an 8.6% budget increase tonight, one of the highest increases in all of Simcoe County, is not fiscally responsible, and it shows a lack of respect and care for the taxpayers of Wasaga Beach. I ask each of you sitting up here today to pause and work a little harder to put resident needs before your own personal wants, and to reduce the budget percentage increase by at least 2%. My final statement was written before I saw tonight's agenda item, but my comments are true. I think you need to take a pause and work to reduce this budget. Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Deputy Clerk?
Thank you, Worship. That completes the list of registered participants that I have.
All right, thank you, Madam Deputy Clerk. I will now look to council for comments or questions. Councillor Belanger?
Thank you, through your worship. I think everyone here knows that I'm the only member of council that sat in the last term. I've heard a lot of comments here tonight, but during the last term of council, when I attended every council meeting, every closed session, and raised concern, even in the case of the library arena, asked to take a pause so we could strengthen our application and get like what every other community that took on a $60 million project did, was secure provincial and federal funding. And every time in those 6-1 votes, when I raised the red flag, when I told our residents and our council that this is where we would be now, not only was there no wholesome discussion, but it quickly went to a 6-1 vote. And I am telling you, review the meetings. I have a list of every time I raised the red flag of concern to say this is exactly where we would be. I'm going to let some others talk.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to ask you to please hold any applause or booing and hissing until the end, so as that we can get through this. Thank you.
Just a couple other things to add, Your Worship. The word irresponsible was used. I want, again, I used the word irresponsible a number of times in open session to talk about what I considered some very poor decisions of the last council. And those weren't political. I was very detailed. I did my research. I clearly defined the concern and the red flags, and they were ignored. They were ignored. So I committed as a member of this council that we will manage taxation effectively, and I will treat the taxpayers' money like my own. But we inherited a huge debt. And we talked a little bit about not securing the finance on $32 million. Believe me, this project is going to go well beyond $60 million. Do the math at 4.5% or 5% interest rate on $32 million over 30 years. I think we're talking $16 to $20 million. So I will end my comments there because I know that others have some things to say. But many of the people that commented tonight, they were not commenting. They were not expressing the concern along with me during the last term of council. So I would suggest to you is review some of those meetings and see if it's come to fruition, exactly what was predicted. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Blanchet. Other questions or comments? Councillor Ego?
Thank you, and through your worship. Yes, I had not planned on speaking at all this evening, but there are 2 points here, and I'll just go back to the Arena Library. Many of you do know that I was president of the Wasaga Beach Ratepayers for the 4 years, and one of the main things we asked this council for, the previous council for, was the price they paid for the Arena Library land, what it had been appraised at. And that information was withheld until the government of Ontario did disclose that this council could get those numbers. And it's very clear, it is in black and white for the world to see that they overpaid by $2 million of the what it was appraised at. That is clear, there is no arguing with that. The ratepayers put a petition forward with thousands of signatures asking just please take a pause until we get through COVID. Let's see where we're at. We're not asking you not to do this, we are asking you to pause. And they did not listen. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ego. Councillor White?
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd like to thank our CFO, Jocelyn, and her team for the hard work that went into this process, as well as all the department heads for contributing. I was shocked to see the 8.6 number in the draft budget, It's a tough number to deal with. This does impact all of us as taxpayers. As you can see with the 4-year forecasts in the previous council, the TPL represents like a golf ball in the garden hose effect on the budget. To address Ms. Bray's comment directly, the slush funds that were described in the campaign was a fund that was set up by your term of council to allow members of council to sue residents with their own money should their feelings get hurt. I am extremely proud of the work that we have done to remove that sword from the indemnification policy and return this town to the best practices as seen in every other municipality in this country. The biggest issue of the day is the Twin Pad Library, and I am pleased to see that it's being built, but the lack of the third funding has left us with an increase to pass along. Andrew, you and I both dug up the same example in North Bay. I won't repeat it, but they had the foresight to hit the pause button when they couldn't get the funding, and then proceed when they did. That said, I am pleased to see what is to come. In the budget, we have a new Work Your Way Wasaga initiative that will address workplace issues and tackles burnout head-on. We have a proper office of the CAO to execute the needs of our quickly evolving town, and a substantial green package that includes green vehicles and charging stations. It's truly a forward-thinking budget, and I will be very pleased to see it passed next month. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other comments? Seeing Deputy Mayor Snell.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to the room. Thank you very much for the residents for coming out. It's really nice to see so much engagement and so many people here taking interest. For myself as a single income earner and a mother of a 16-year-old, I can relate to the financial pressures that we're all facing. Our grocery bills have nearly doubled, fuel prices have soared, and our mortgages will likely increase when it comes time to renew. However, our town has been lacking in investment to move us forward. In our community pride as it relates to how we present our town to the world, with a progressive and inclusive development for our beachfront, we have to make progress on our Main Street development, and I feel it is critical to invest in our only industry of tourism and our economic development team in order to attract more commercial investments so that we don't have the residents solely absorbing the impact when it comes to tax increases. We can naturally criticize adding senior staff during lean times. However, our community has a lot of heavy lifting to do if we want to realize these vital changes in the next decade. In the past 3 weeks alone, this council has witnessed developers propose an additional 890 units to our community to be built on top of what is already in the queue. We need to invest in our infrastructure to manage that traffic and essential needs for this growth. I had questioned during previous budget meetings about fleet, both for reduction in green energy, and I also pulled 3 items in particular that I felt were possibly not essential. I posed those to the senior staff, and when they responded, they shared the background and the rationale behind the items. I've also put forward the idea of being creative. We have to, I think, explore corporate sponsorships for staff's consideration in strategic planning. I believe that we need to be creative and recognize that businesses and corporations, corporate brands, would like to promote to our residents and visitors, and we should be capitalizing on that to offset our community investments and expenses. If we want our community to be progressive and to offer its residents what every other community offers, then unfortunately that comes at a cost. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Any other questions or, comments from council members? All right, seeing none, I will speak to a lot of issues tonight. And there was a lot of questions and a lot of comments made. And so if I miss some, I do apologize, but I think it's important that I try to respond to as many as I can. But I will say that our last speaker brought up a lot of comments and questions that I think I need to respond to as well. But I want to start with each member of your council sitting here tonight are taxpayers as well. And we are not happy with the increase in any way, shape, or form. If you think it's easy to sit here and tell you folks that we're looking at an 8.6 or an 8.8% tax increase, you're sadly mistaken, is very difficult. And I want to commend our staff for the amazing work, the amount of effort that they put into this, the passion that they have for this community to try and create the best budget we possibly can. But at the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen, there are a lot of factors that are out of our control. Bill 109, Bill 23. They're kicking every municipality in the butt, and they're kicking us hard. But we have zero control over that. When we look at the credit card fees, and this came up a couple of times tonight, credit card fees are, I believe, about $203,000 annually to the town of Wasaga Beach. That's about 0.7% that the taxpayer, the other 80% of the taxpayers who don't use credit cards are paying for. I personally love to use my credit card to collect points. But the rest of the taxpayers who don't use credit cards are paying for that. And it is part of the tax base that we need to collect in order to continue running our town in an efficient manner. So we might look at this and say, you're penalizing folks who can't afford to pay that 20%, but what we're actually doing currently is we're penalizing the other 80% who pay by check or by cash or by debit card for that. And so that becomes a part of the taxes required, or it's $203,000 less in tax revenue, you could also say, that we're receiving. So it's not about making people's lives difficult. I can assure you, ladies and gentlemen, that this council and the staff of this municipality are very well aware of the less fortunate and our most vulnerable in this community. We are very well aware of the big city issues that are coming to small town Ontario and we're facing today. And we are determined to fix those issues, along with the help of other levels of government, because we all share in this together. At the end of the day, there is only one taxpayer. It's interesting to hear that this council is irresponsible and don't care. Irresponsible, ladies and gentlemen, would to take this budget, have the staff work through this, council to come to the table 5 times, and hear from the experts, the people who make the wheels go round on this bus, thank God every day, these people, who tell us this is what we require and this is the best we can do. And here are the reasons why. Irresponsible would be to say, too bad, we're going to reduce that to half of that, and we'll look next year or the year after, or maybe leave it to another council to solve the issue. That, my friends, would be irresponsible. Being on council is about making tough decisions. The easy ones we can all make. So it's quite disheartening to hear that this council would be irresponsible to pass this budget. Half of this budget is due to the last council's decision to build their legacy in the Arena Library without funding from other levels of government. I can speak to this, ladies and gentlemen, because I sat on council as your mayor between 14 and 18. And we started the process. We took staff and members of the public, a committee, to other communities to look at arenas and libraries, to find out, to determine what would be best for our community. But what council said then was that we'll be prepared, we'll be ready, we know we need a new library, we know we need a new arena, But we are not going to move forward without funding from other levels of government because this community cannot afford it. You've heard it mentioned tonight by our CAO, and Councillor White referred to the city of North Bay. 50,000 people in that city. And their council, a few years back, needed to build a new library. They did their homework. They submitted their plan to the federal and provincial government, and they were denied funding. And that council said, like many councils in this province, 444 of us, said we cannot possibly afford a $50 million arena over a town or a city of 50,000 people. So they didn't move forward. What did they do? They went back. They worked harder. They strengthened their ask. And they went back and eventually got funding, and they built their arena. 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. The council that Ms. Bray sits on, or sat on, didn't worry about that. They applied, didn't get it. 25,000 people, half of North Bay, and $10 million more of debt. We can handle it. We need our legacy. And they moved forward. And today, ladies and gentlemen, we are paying that price. Now, I want to be clear. We need a new arena. We need a new library. Our citizens, our community deserves it. But at what cost? And to come before this council and accuse us of being irresponsible for now looking after your debt, your problem that you've created, that in itself is irresponsible. I see on social media, someone sends me a note today where a member of the past council says, when will the rhetoric stop? Well, that's a question, my friend, whoever put that up there, for you to answer. An experienced council, we continue to hear this. Ladies and gentlemen, you have experience on this council. Councillor Belanger has been on council now over 8 years. Myself with 4 years' experience in the past. And then we have a new group, but of bright people, who ran a solid campaign, and the people, you folks, spoke loud and clear with a very clear mandate. And we take that very seriously, believe me. People are afraid to speak out. I have no idea where that comes from. I can tell you, ladies and gentlemen, that staff every day get hundreds of calls. My office alone gets probably between emails, text messages, and phone calls, 100 items a day. Believe me, I can assure you, people are not afraid to speak out. And tonight is a prime example of that. We've heard good, we've heard bad, and we've heard ugly. And this council is prepared to sit here and listen all night long, because we do care about what you say. But there are only certain things that we have control over. But fiscal responsibility, we are charged with, and we are committed to. I hear reduced hours for staff. Ladies and gentlemen, I have to tell you, and you probably already know this, but the last term of council, we've seen 82 members of staff leave this corporation. 61%. Now, I'd fall on the sword any day for the people that work in this town. We have the best of the best. And they work hard. And so why, you have to ask yourself, did we lose 82 employees in 4 years? I'll tell you why. Mismanagement and working people to the point where they break. This town has worked extremely lean for far too many years. I run a business. I never want to increase the costs of running the business. And I treat this municipality like I would treat my own business. And nor do we want to increase the costs to you, the shareholder. But we cannot continue to have staff, good quality people, going to other municipalities because they just can't take the pace and work as hard as they do. And I will tell you that the people I'm looking at in front of me here today and many others, most of them went through the last 4 years that lean. The cost to replace a staff member on average in the corporate world is about 30% of their salary. So if the average salary at the town of Wasaga Beach is $75,000, 30% of that, it works out to about $1.8 million, the cost just to replace those 82 staff. Never mind the time that is lost, never mind the work that didn't get done, and the fact that we're so far behind in so many things because of it. These are costs that some people don't want to speak to that are built into this budget to try and fix and recoup, and most of all, keep and retain good quality people. But we don't want to talk about that. We just want to talk about how fiscally irresponsible this council is for making tough decisions. An in-house council, this is a luxury that we don't need. Ladies and gentlemen, I invite you to look at our budgets, to look at our costs every year, and look at how much money your municipality spends on legal costs. And we fully believe, and this has been realized with other municipalities, that to bring an in-house general counsel will absolutely save tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars as we move forward. Bad things happen if we don't watch what this council's doing. Well, I have to agree. Bad things do happen if you don't watch what council's doing. We learned that in the last term of council. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I am sorry. I apologize. But there comes a time where you listen to the rhetoric long enough, and it's time to correct the record. So I could go on and on and on, but we don't have a bar here. But here's what I will tell you, ladies and gentlemen, that you will not see this council do, that you've seen the last council do. You will not see this council get a property appraised for $3.5 million and pay $5.8 million for it. You will not see this council get an appraised value on your beachfront lands, the most precious lands we own, of $9 million more than we sell it to a developer for. Now, don't take my word for this, ladies and gentlemen. This will all become public record, believe me. You will not see this council sell your business park lands to a developer for the assessed value of the property of about $1.3 million versus the appraised value, which I believe was low, at $8 million. And you take a $5.5 million loss. You will not see this council destroy tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars of public records a week before the new council is sworn in. You won't see this council do that. Not now and not ever. And when the next election comes and you have an opportunity to go to the poll, and whatever that election brings, I will tell you that you will see clearly whether these people are sitting at this table or these folks are sitting at those tables, that there will be no destruction of public records. To what end? So if I seem angry, I am. I didn't start out that way, But there's only so much that an individual can withstand, and it's important that you have this information. So to the people who want to come forward from previous councils or from the public who may be their supporters and accuse this council this early at being irresponsible, unjust, not caring, I suggest you look back at the past. Again, I apologize for my rant, but I think it was necessary to get this information out. Again, I want to thank you all for being here and for paying attention. There's lots to come, I'm sure. This council is fully aware, ladies and gentlemen, of the challenges we face. We do not like a budget over 8%, but I will tell you this, last thing, when you take the 4.5% of the arena costs out of this budget, our budget's about 4%. And if you look around the county, the country, you will see that we are right in line with most municipalities. I can tell you that Tiny Township passed a budget last week, I believe, about 10.8%. There have been lots of municipalities in that 4, 5, and 6% range. So, I thank you for your time. I wish you a good evening, and this meeting is adjourned.
Sorry, Your Worship.
Oh.
We just have a motion for that.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, we do. My apologies again. I got off on my tirade. And I can't imagine you wanting to make another comment, Councillor Belanger, but go ahead.
I didn't want to steal the mayor's thunder, but I waited a long time for the information to come out that the mayor just shared with the public. And I'm not going to talk about my 4 sanctions, but I was sanctioned 30 days' pay for alerting the public that our precious beachfront property was going to be sold well below its actual value. And now we have found that an appraisal existed that was never shown to council, that only a very few people were aware of, that was $9 million higher. And I'll talk later about the rest. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Belanger. The other thing, I guess, I'll just mention that you won't see this council do is to give out mortgages to wealthy developers in the tune of $8 million at 0% financing. I do have a motion before us. This is from the Director of Finance with respect to the operating and capital budget, that the report titled 2023 Proposed Operating and Capital Budgets and 4-Year Operational Plan and 10-Year Capital Plan to the Joint Committee of the Whole of March 28, 23 be received, and that the delegations from the 2023 budget public consultation be received, and that staff be directed to bring the 2023 operating capital budgets and 4-year operational plan and 10-year capital plan to the Joint Committee of the Whole and Council for final consideration at the April 13th meeting. Can I have a mover and a seconder for this, please? By Councillor Timms and Councillor White. All in favor? That motion carries unanimously, and now this meeting is adjourned.